All right, and welcome on my next guest. We've got three-time Super Bowl champion, member of the College Football Hall of Fame, San Francisco 49ers legend, Mr. Randy Cross. Randy, how's everything going?
Doing well, doing really well. I mean, how bad could it be? We've got football back.
Yeah. So what were your thoughts on the Big Ten reversing course and deciding to play?
Um, I guess everybody could have been quite this, cautious. I'm not sure if they were cautious as much as they were overly cautious. But if they come back, they come back. If the Pac-12 comes back, great. I mean, if not, we've got the ones that are currently playing. The Big Ten playing in mid-October sounds kind of weird, but we got to remember, the SEC won't even be back till next weekend on the 26th. So
Yeah.
it'll sync up fairly well. It'll all be around New Year's Day or so. We can get some stuff going.
Yeah. What were your thoughts on the first week NFL? How do you think? I know your Niners didn't do too well, but they'll bounce back. But what were your thoughts on all the games altogether?
Well, in the atmosphere that we've been played in, I thought Bill Belichick had probably the most honest observation when asked about the atmosphere for the game. He basically said, "Well, what, practice? Would that be the best analogy?" That's really what it is. It's an unattended scrimmage. It's hard to put that kind of excitement as that a game will generate. I'm really interested to watch another event this week, like the U.S. Open in golf, that is traditionally played in a very raucous kind of atmosphere, especially when it's played in the New York area, which is going to be dull and flat, and see what the reactions are.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about your football career. So how did you end up at UCLA?
Well, I was recruited by most schools for football and track. I was a shot putter. I won the state out in California back then. Threw it pretty well, almost 68 feet, and threw the 16-pounder 60 feet when I was in high school. So they were legitimate. I mean, Notre Dame recruited me only as a football player. See who else? Nebraska recruited me only as a football player. Alabama only as a football player. But Texas, UCLA, USC, Stanford, most of the other ones, it was all about both. And to be honest, I thought I could just handle both. And I had never been a huge fan of spring football. So I figured it was a great chance to do something I loved and avoid those extra beatings in the springtime. Yeah, I thought that'd be perfect.
I have a question. Did you intertwine with Doc Walker? I know he's a UCLA guy too.
Yeah, Doc was at UCLA the same time I was. He
cool.
Came in there. I believe, yeah, he was there. I think almost exactly the same. Might have stayed one extra year than me. I think he might have been a red shirt in there. He might have his last season might have been 76.
Oh, cool. So how did you adjust to the kind of like the D1 level? Was it relatively easy for you?
It wasn't so bad. It was, I played defense in high school. Okay. I played my junior year. I played some both ways. My senior year, I played defense. The guy that ended up playing for me on offense also went to UCLA, Keith Eck, and played guard. So, we had a pretty strong team when I was in high school. We probably had a dozen guys or so get D1 scholarships. So it was easy to just play one way on that team. And, but when I got to UCLA, they changed me over after my freshman year, mainly into that first spring. They tried to teach me how to snap. Terry Donahue was my offensive line coach, who I owe the world to. He and Bob McKittrick were my two primary offensive line coaches through the course of my college and professional careers. Both had that basis in the Tommy Prothro style of UCLA football, hitting the Crowther sled, all the basics, all the fundamentals. But so it was kind of a winding path to get to the NFL in general.
Was the NFL on your radar at that time, or was it kind of like was it a reality, or were you kind of What was it like? Were you focused on college at the time, or what was your thought process?
Well, I started alternated as a sophomore. Myself and a guy named Art Kuhn played center. My junior year, Art played center. I played guard. And it was spring of my junior year. I talked to one scout that impressed me the most was Gil Brandt with the
Pretty
Cowboys.
good one. Pretty good one.
Yeah. And he told me I was going to be a first or second round draft pick. And he was about the most honest guy I talked to. I don't think I was exactly cowboy material. I was a little half bent in general, in the truest sense of the word. I enjoyed myself in college, and I wasn't quite the straight shooting All-American squeaky clean guy that they were looking for. But he gave me the best advice about being drafted. And my senior year, I played guard and center.
Wow.
We had a rotating 9-man line. So on the first line, I played right guard. Then the second line would come in after a couple series. I played center on that line, and we just rotate throughout the game that way.
Oh, cool. So what was your draft process like? So you said you had an idea you're going to be an early round pick. Did you do combine, everything? What was that whole thing like?
Well, to date myself, there was no combine then.
Wow. Oh, wow.
There were pro days. So you did your pro day, you ran your 40, you did your drills and all that. And I had really good speed. I mean, between my junior and senior year, I think my 40s were in the 4.75, 4.85, right in that territory. So I could run pretty good. And that was my biggest appeal. I mean, I was very quick. I had good speed. I wasn't very strong. I didn't mind telling anybody I really hadn't lifted weights. I mean, seriously, had not lifted weights. I didn't really lift.
The shot put didn't help you with that, or no?
That was all technique and quickness.
Wow.
And I could get it out there. I grew up very much in an urban environment in LA. So I can't say I had country strength. I wasn't country strong. I was city strong.
Yeah. Oh, cool. That's wild. And then, so how did you find out you're going to San Francisco?
I got a phone call in my mom and dad's house. I got a call in the first round. Cleveland called, and they were, I think, the 18th pick, something like that. And the coach there was an offensive line coach who had been the head coach at the local college, which back then was called Cal State Northridge.
Okay.
Now they've got all kinds of other names for it. But he had called me and told me, hey, we're talking about drafting you with this pick. What do you think? And being the lame-brained idiot I was then, my response was, you mean like Cleveland, Ohio? It snows there, doesn't it?
A little bit.
Yeah. They didn't think much of that response. So well, good for them. They got a guy that was great for them for a good bit, Mike Pruitt, the fullback out of Purdue. And I lasted until, about 10 picks, I think, into the second round.
Were you ecstatic to basically, like, you're not too far from Southern California, but basically it's better than Cleveland.
I was tickled to death. I really had not much expected, and I didn't really embrace what that meant. So when they called and said they had drafted me, it was Monty Clark, who was the offensive line coach for the Dolphins in those great teams in the early 70s. So he was the new head coach, and he said he had drafted me, and I was like, hey, cool. That'd be fun. I can't wait to give it a go.
That's wild.
And so I was very naive, very, I really had planned on sort of going to work. Playing football wasn't that on my radar.
Interesting. So was it an easy adjustment for you coming to training camp your rookie year, or was there any hurdles for you?
I guess the first hurdle was I went up the next week for a press conference and a sort of a workout. So I did the press conference, and I show up. I'm in jeans, flip-flops. I got a Hawaiian shirt on, and I've got hair down to about here. So I show up, and he kind of looks at me, and he goes, this better be a good workout. So I go into the gym, and I do 2 reps at 2 1/4. I do one pull-up, 2 chin-ups, and he looks at me as I'm walking out the door. He goes, are you trying to get me fired? And I kind of laughed. I went, no, coach. I mean, I've never really lifted weights. He goes, well, you better run a hell of a 40. And I ran like a 4.8, 4.85, something like that. So he was happy with that. But training camp, the guy that had started the year before was a gentleman by the name of Bill Reed from Stanford. And he blew his knee out, I think, the first full pad practice in camp. So from that day, I was first team. I was starting at center. I was selected to play in the old college football all-star game against the Super Bowl champion. And Monty Clark brought me in his office and said, look, you got a choice. You can go play for them, or you can stay here and start for me. Which is it going to be? So I was like, I guess I'll stay here and start for you.
Good choice.
Give me the long term. Give me the long term deal.
Yeah, that's wild. That's what. And then, so what was your first experience like when Bill Walsh came into the fold?
Well, that was 3 years later. 3 long years later. We were 8-6 that first year, and Monty got fired. Joe Thomas came in as the general manager, and the next coach he hired was Ken Meyer in '77. He fired him. And then in '78, he hired Pete McCulley, and he got halfway through the year, he fired him. And then they named Fred O'Connor, the running back coach, the head coach, and they fired him. And then they fired Joe Thomas, and they brought in Bill Walsh. So I was going into my 4th year, and Bill was my 5th head coach. So to say I was a bit jaded and skeptical would have been I mean, I'd seen what he had done at Stanford, but honestly, I was taking care of me. I wasn't about anything else. I wanted to last as long. I figured out this getting paid to play football thing was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to jeopardize it. And if he worked out, great. If he didn't, I wanted to keep playing.
I think it's fair to say he worked out pretty well. So.
Well, yeah, first meeting we had, he addresses the team and he says, okay, guys, I know what you're thinking. Many of you have survived 1, 2, 3, 4 coaches, and you figure, hey, I'll just survive this guy. And if I don't survive him, I can go play somewhere else. He says, this is the worst team in the NFL by a lot. If you can't play here, where can you play? And everybody in the meeting room was like, he might have a pretty good point.
Yeah.
But it did. It worked out extremely well.
When did you realize that he was just built differently?
That was right away. You figured that out with Bill pretty fast. Anybody that smart, his brain never really seemed to shut off. It was always spinning and going. But we got in those first training camp practices, and we'd go. You always go against good, ones against ones. And when we did that in normal circumstances, we didn't always move the ball. We did it with Bill's offense. We moved the ball. So, that little light went on, there might be something to this. We got in preseason games, we moved the ball and we scored. We got in regular season games, we moved the ball and we scored. Unfortunately, defensively, we couldn't play dead. So we were 2-14 again. Then we were 6-10 in 1980. And then he started doing signings. He started between free agencies and draft. He drafted a defensive backfield with Ronnie and Carlton and Eric Wright. He traded for guys like Fred Dean. He signed guys like Jack Reynolds. We brought on the better part of a really good defense, which complemented our offense extremely well.
And then, so speaking of the offense, eventually you did bring on that one great quarterback from Notre Dame, Mr. Joe Montana. Did you have a feeling like this guy, like we're going to be good, like we're going to be great?
Well, you could figure that out. I mean, like I said, in '79, you'd run plays and he'd be a quarterback, or DeBerg would be a quarterback. We were going to do stuff. And then the more he got a chance to play, the more you didn't need to be convinced that he was the man. So when that started, 1980, We were 6-10. We had the biggest comeback in the history of the NFL that year versus the New Orleans Saints. We went in at halftime down 35-7.
Wow.
And he led the comeback. We beat them 38-35. And that's a chip. You know, people don't realize how important that was, because there were a lot of us. There were 4 of us. You know, Keith Von Horst, John Ayers, Fred Quillen, and myself. We were on that team. Freddie Solomon, he was on that team. We had a bunch of guys in '81 that were on that team. Bill Ring, go down the list on offense. Dwight Clark, Freddie Solomon. I mean, so once you do something like that, it has a lasting effect for many years afterwards, because you can always kind of recall. You know, you get in the fourth quarter, there's 7 minutes left, you're down by 10 points. You look at the scoreboard and you go, no problem. We get the ball 2 or 3 more times. We can score 21 points between now and the end of the game. So you never really panicked. And that was something that paid off for years to come.
So without that added confidence, knowing that you guys came back from, 28, does that first Super Bowl come as easily, or do you think that was attributed a lot to it?
It helped. It helped. We played a championship game against Dallas that year, which was a rematch, because we beat them 45-14, I think, in the regular season, or 42-14. And they said, well, that wasn't the real Cowboys. Well, they didn't know that wasn't the real Niners. We turned the ball over like crazy in that championship game. We had just, I think, double-digit penalties. It was the sloppiest, nastiest performance we'd had that year, but we still found a way to win. I think that was one of the reasons we were so confident going into that Super Bowl against the Bengals.
Wow. So what was that? Were there any jitters for you, or were you do you think you were really relatively well prepared to go
for the Super Bowl?
Yeah.
Yeah. There were some jitters. It was really weird. I'd been to Super Bowls. So I've been to the Super Bowl at the Rose Bowl when the Vikings and the Raiders played, and the Raiders won their game after the '77 season. So I knew there were huge crowds. I knew there was huge hoopla. Super Bowl hadn't become the Super Bowl yet. There had only been 15 of them. This was the 16th, but it was close. It was still a big deal, but it was indoors. This is the first indoor Super Bowl, I believe. Going into that dome 3 hours, 4 hours before the game and seeing a crowd in the stands, and they're all dressed really nice. It was really strange. I mean, I was used to tailgaters, people painted bodies, arms, faces. This wasn't it. This was sport coat and ruffled dresses, and they looked like they were going to the opera, not a football game. But it worked out just fine.
Yeah. So I saw Diana Ross did the anthem. Did that kind of hype you guys up, or you were like, all right, this is for real now?
Well, at that point, the NFL wasn't on the field for the national anthem.
Really? I don't know.
Yeah. So we weren't there. Couldn't tell you. Might have heard it a little bit leaking.
I want my money
walls.
back. I didn't get to see Diana. I want my money.
Yeah. So, the NFL was smart beyond their years back then, because there were problems not to be had being on the field for the national anthem.
Yeah.
But yeah, we didn't get to see much of that pregame hoopla. We hit the field right before the game, right before the coin toss, and it wasn't bad. In subsequent Super Bowls, it's the most untenable, awkward, inconvenient time of your athletic career, is the time between leaving the locker room and when the toe actually met the ball and kicked off the game, because it took freaking forever to do the anthem, to do the introductions, to go down the list. It was almost 15 minutes. It was almost why did we come out and warm up? By the time that you actually played the game, you were already cooled off.
Was the first one the hardest for you?
Probably. It's the first one was the first one. That's always incredibly special. The second one was the best team I played on. The third team was the third Super Bowl was my last game. So they each have individual kind of special spots in my heart.
Yeah. What was it like going out on top like that?
Storybook. That was kind of the plan to start with. When I decided I was going to retire, I figured, you might as well retire with the Super Bowl championship. And I was lucky I got to do that.
That's awesome. That's wild. And then, so how did you get into broadcasting?
I had been doing radio and TV shows in the Bay Area for several years before I retired. Had a production company, and we actually did the TV show. I did my own radio stuff. I was on KCBS on the radio side. I syndicated the show in Northern California on the TV side. I had done Oakland Invaders USFL games, which gave me a chance to actually do some football, which is pretty unusual for guys coming out. And I had just inundated the networks with my tape for 3 or 4 years before I ever got to do it.
What was like kind of like the stand-up moment of your broadcasting career when you were like, I can't believe I'm here?
That very first couple of games, I had signed a contract to do 7 games. So the plan was I'd do one early, then I'd do one a little later, then a couple in the middle, and a couple at the end. And the next year in 1990, they'd expand my role. Well, I did pretty well. So I ended up doing 15 games. I almost did one every week.
Oh, wow.
And that was a surprise to me, but they liked what I was doing. I worked during the playoffs. I worked for the NFL Today on the playoffs, during the playoffs. So my first assignment for them was a divisional round at San Francisco. And
they picked that one out, and
how they ever assigned me to that,
I don't know. It was random.
But what that meant was I got to stand on the sideline, watch them warm up, and hit myself in the head with a clipboard saying, "You idiot, they're going to do it again, and you could be here."
Did you have your cleats with you or no?
It only works like that in Hollywood.
Honestly, yeah. Honestly, Washington, they let anybody play down here, so you can come out off the street. So I don't know. Yeah, it's wild. That's interesting. And then so I saw you moved to CBS, and you've been there forever. What was that like? Just flipping over college football?
I was with CBS from '89 until they lost football, which was 5 years: '89, '90, '91, '92, '93. They lose football. Fox takes football over, takes the NFC over, and I went and ended up at NBC. I ended up cold calling Dick Ebersol, the president of NBC Sports.
Yeah.
And telling him, basically I called him and he asked, it's the old, "Hey, how you doing? Good to hear from you. What can I do for you?"
You call 411 and just be like, "Hey, let me get Dick Ebersol."
Well, no, I had this little NFL book, so I knew the numbers. And I called him and I said, "Look, I'm not going to waste any of your time. I just want to know why you don't want me to work for you, because my agent tells me you're not interested." And he goes, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, that's not true. I'd be interested." I said, "Well, fine. You want to meet?" And this is like on a Thursday. He goes, "Yeah, can you be here Monday night? I'll meet with you Tuesday." I said, "Yeah, I can do that." So he put me together with his assistant. They flew me out. I met with him. And we, had a great meeting, and I ended up working for them for 4 years until CBS got the NFL back. Only this time they were doing the AFC instead of the NFC, but that was fine. And I've been with them ever since then. I did NFL football for 20 years.
Wow.
Did 3-4 years at the NFL Today. I've worked in every possible role, every possible way. And then about 10 years ago, they started having me cover college football. So I've done that and inside college football on the CBS Sports Network for 10 years, and Navy games and all sorts of other college football.
Oh, cool. That's wild. And then, so I saw you did some radio too. Is that of an interest as well?
Yeah. I mean, I did local radio in San Francisco. I've done Westwood One, Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football. I've done playoff football. I've done Super Bowls. Lots. And back here, when I first moved to Atlanta, I did local sports radio. Did that for a few years. As happens in local radio, some consultant came along and thought they'd get somebody better. Then I went, and when they started another sports radio show or sports radio station here, CBS did. I went to work for them, and I did 3 or 4 years of that until, again, a dreaded consultant said they could figure something better out, and probably somebody could work for cheaper, which is what it's usually like in radio. So I did that. But I've been doing radio and TV now for forever. What, 32 years?
That's wild. I saw you do. You do a podcast? Is that too?
Yeah, I've got at my website randycross.com.
Oh, cool.
I've got a very creative title, the Randy Cross Podcast.
How'd you think of that
one? Never could have figured it out. But it's fun. It's a little bit of my personality. It's a little off the wall. It's a little bit of fun. It's a little serious. It's sports. It's entertainment. It's food. It's football. It's like I said, it's kind of a cross section. It's like if you cut me in half, it'd be what you would see, the layers.
So I have a question. So you're a UCLA guy. Are you surprised Josh Rosen has fallen off as much as he has?
Not really. No, not really. He had a very traumatic experience at UCLA. People always talked about how well he threw the ball and what arm talent he was, and that was true. But getting the snot beat out of you like that is not a good experience, and rarely does that result in somebody who comes out the other side. Whether that happens in college or when you get to the pros, it's a very traumatic experience. He's a fine young man who I'm sure will do great things in his life. It's just maybe time for him to move on to the next stage of his life.
Interesting. That's wild. It's wild how much of it. It's crazy how much he's dropped off. And then for your Niners, so Super Bowl didn't really go as planned. They've got a great young core. What are your thoughts on the season? You got Jimmy G back. Kittle got paid. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
Well, one, I wish they'd drop this whole revenge tour thing. You're not getting revenge. When that game ended, you just represent the other 30 teams that didn't win. That's all. You're just the first loser. So the hell with revenge. Just go about your business and go about 2020. This is a bizarre enough year. You don't need another moniker on the season. And I wish them the best of luck. I'm a big fan. I think they've got some pretty amazing talent on both sides of the ball. They're excellent at the line of scrimmage, great skill, go down the list. So I think they're a playoff team, and as long as you get in the tournament, you got a shot.
How happy were you when they got Trent Williams from Washington?
Oh, almost as happy as I saw. Have you seen that highlight?
Yeah. And that other guy's seen it 15 times. Oh
well, the other guy, that might be the last play on his resume.
Yeah. Wow. Now, because as soon as I saw it, I'm like, all right. And then they got Jordan Reed too. I don't know how he's gonna do, but hopefully he's doing well upstairs because he took a lot of beatings in DC. But but when they got Williams for nothing, they give him a third. I'm like, all right, you just got arguably top 2 left tackle in football. Yeah. It's gonna be scary.
It's good. They've got certifiable talent.
Yeah,
they really, really do.
Yeah,
and it's going to be fun to watch. I'm really looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Well, that's really all the questions I really had for you. I just want to really just thank you again for taking time to chat. And then how can people find you on social media to keep up with you?
Well, again, Twitter's Randy Cross FB. Instagram is rcross podcast, rcross51 podcast. And for anything me related, randycross.com. It's pretty simple.
Cool. It's very creative. I like what you did with that one. Nah.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, all the links are there.
All right, cool. Man, this has been a ton of fun. I just wanted to thank you again. I really appreciate it.